Hello, everybody. Tonight we're going to look at Mexico. This is promised to be one of the most detailed discussions on the internet. I simply couldn't find very much helpful demographic information about what's going on in Mexico. And actually, Mexico is the seventh most visited, one of the most visited countries in the world, and one of the wealthiest countries in the world, top 15. And it's very important for us to take a look at all this data. So we got about 40 primary diagrams that we're going to look at, maybe up to 100 or so different slides. So it's going to be quite a detailed discussion. So I wanted to start with this, showing the population primarily of Central America, and really show how important Mexico City is. It's the one in the middle here. And then also how important Guatemala is, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Honduras, heading into the Panama Peninsula right in here. So you can kind of see there's these different population groups that kind of separate how you think about Mexico. So actually, there's kind of a couple different kinds of Mexican areas, and they're not all the same. They're very different. And I actually probably should have circled the peninsula here, and I'm going to go ahead and circle that right now, and kind of adding that. This is probably one of the more interesting maps you're going to see of Mexico. You can kind of see some new areas that you might not have anticipated, all the way going from here, Tijuana and Baja California. But basically, Mexico City being kind of at the heart of what's going on here. So I'm going to switch to the population map, and we're going to look at more at just the population. And you can see quite a heavy population around Mexico City, and actually kind of the south side, heading down to Acapulco, and then out to here is kind of Puerto Vallarta, and then up here is Monterrey, and then kind of the border with Texas. There's some other big cities heading out to Tijuana and El Paso and so on. But it is really important to kind of diagram this out. You can see kind of the river maps too here, showing some of the states and how that's all related. This map can give you a really detailed view of the climate. I wanted to kind of zoom in here and take a look at what's going on. But you can see kind of the Mexico City area is kind of in this light green and dark green area. And then you can see much of the northern part is actually desert, heading up into Monterrey. But then there's kind of this coastline here that has actually got very good farming, and actually a lot of rain and jungle kind of environment kind of on the south side of Mexico. And then this peninsula being also pretty dry here too. One of the most difficult parts about studying Mexico is really the crime situation. So of all the most dangerous cities in the world, actually Mexico has almost all of the top 10, 9 of the top 10 most dangerous cities in the world are all in Mexico, and actually New Orleans being up there as well. So you can kind of see, compare that if you're familiar with New Orleans, and then down here you got a couple other United States places, Baltimore, Detroit, Cleveland, kind of giving you some idea of what the danger levels are. This map was really helpful, kind of showing the cities that are the most problematic, and you can see actually it's just west of Mexico City, and actually Mexico City is actually pretty much safer than many of these other areas. But you can see Tijuana up here, El Paso, Monterrey, and then kind of the coast, to give you some idea of the safety structure of Mexico, since basically internationally you can kind of see Jamaica being the worst, down here Mexico also being in the top 20 most dangerous countries in the world, even more dangerous than Nigeria apparently, so that's something to think about, and basically on the level of Colombia, so that kind of surprised me to think about. One thing I would do is go ahead and just map all these so you can see where these cities are. It was helpful to just click on each of these. This is from Wikipedia, and then you can kind of tell which areas to kind of avoid. But in general, Tijuana is up here. You want to look at these populations. So the populations where you see large populations is going to be part of the problem. Juarez and some other areas where the populations are more actually are going to be even more significant maybe than the crime numbers show here. So let's look at the traffic map. You can kind of see everything is kind of around Mexico City, particularly on the west side and south side of Mexico City. The traffic can be bad. And then you kind of have beachfront Veracruz heading out to the tip, and then here's Yucatan and all the way to Cancun and Chiapas. I was really surprised to see some of this other data about Chiapas as well. So you might look at the nighttime map as well, kind of seeing up along the coast, and there is quite a lot of stuff going on just around Mexico City. And actually some of the coolest cities are actually connected. You might want to do a search for tourist attractions in Mexico, and then you'll see many of the smaller cities are actually quite cool and fun to check out. This is a farming map for Mexico, so you can kind of see where the farms are as well as the population. The population is kind of the bluish color, as well as this light blue is actually the purple blue is kind of population, and then the heavy dense farming is in blue. And you can see that goes right up to the border here, kind of in right along the Rio Grande. Zoom in on the population. This is a NASA population map. Kind of gives you some new clues about how this northern area works in Monterrey, as well as some other details that you might not be familiar with along this Veracruz area. And then this is kind of the Acapulco, and then seeing how Cancun and the Yucatan Peninsula works in Mexico as well. One thing that's very surprising about Mexico is there's very few international airports. Look at all the international airports in the United States, and then look at Mexico. The red ones are the major airports, so if you're trying to get to another place in the light orange dot, you're probably very unlikely to be able to fly there. They do have airports there, but there's basically Cancun, Mexico City, Acapulco, and then you can see Puerto Vallarta, Monterrey, and the tip of Baja California. And then this kind of shows you some of the soil maps. You can see where there is maybe good soil for farming, and it's actually a little bit different than you might think, and showing some areas both inland, and this actually I didn't want to circle, but it's actually a very important farming region. The whole Yucatan Peninsula is very good farming. So this map was kind of interesting, kind of looking more, diagnosing the kind of population. You can see some of the rivers here and how this river system works with the population. But basically Mexico City kind of heading out to Veracruz through these couple rivers, and then a couple rivers heading out here near Acapulco, kind of in between these two areas. One of the most important maps that you might see is actually the topographic map. You'll actually see a split in the mountain range, so it's almost like Mexico should almost end right at this point, but it actually takes all of the Yucatan Peninsula, and then this mountain range actually becomes mainly part of Central America and Guatemala. So basically it's important to see this little sliver right here, kind of showing some area in between these two mountain ranges that basically heads north into most of North America and the Rockies, as well as this coastline here. It's very good for farming as well. So one thing that might surprise you about the Mexican economy is it's very heavily oriented towards vehicles and food. So almost 30% of their economy is about vehicles, and this is net profit that we looked at. This is not just the actual sales. So the actual sales is around $2 trillion for the whole economy, but their profit is only around 200 billion. So you can see they're actually importing a lot of plastics and minerals, which is kind of a bad thing for Mexico. They should probably start working a little bit more on the oil front, and also on the petrochemicals, making plastics and rubber and doing some of that stuff themselves, as well as the mining and electromachinery that could all improve. And then here you can kind of see some of those ports with Puerto Vallarta and then some of these Veracruz areas. along the coastline here, and you can see this is really bright green, which is great farmland, and you can kind of see that passageway between the two mountain ranges here, and you can see Acapulco right here, not being super busy port, but some of these other ports being quite busy. Geological map is super interesting. Actually, there's quite a lot of earthquakes along the west coast here, so I definitely watch out. Actually, the safer side of Mexico is probably over here, but when you consider the crime map, you kind of got to look at that, plus the natural disasters with earthquakes, and you can kind of see there's some separate areas that show different characteristics of how the geology works in Mexico. Definitely take a look at those maps. Then here's another one of those farming maps, kind of looking at these different regions, separating those out kind of in different chunks to help see what's going on a little bit more in detail than that first diagram that we looked at. And then here's another soil map. Some of these purple areas are actually very good soil, as well as pink areas have pretty good soil as well. I didn't really circle the pink areas, but definitely these pink areas have good soil. And this yellow stuff is actually all desert, so that's pretty bad. But the flood zone area, this purplish stuff should be pretty good, and there's definitely a lot of room for farming here along the coast, similar to what you got in Florida. Some of this purple zone would be similar to that. And then this is kind of looking at the structure of how this works with the population. So you can see there's definitely a whole area kind of heading up north, and a lot of that has to do with the climate. You can kind of see this climate map kind of comes up here, so it's similar climate, and a lot of people like that green kind of California climate year round, so you can kind of look at how that population works there. And then you can see in the north here, I didn't really go into Monterrey, but there's some other cities, Veracruz, and how that might work through some different areas that you might not quite anticipate. And this is heading down into Guatemala City from Mexican territory, and then Acapulco being a very important place off of Mexico City, kind of the main closest beach town, but then these other beach towns also being very important with Puerto Vallarta out here. And then this is the electrical map. This is a little bit hard to read in that zoom level, so I'll zoom in here, and you can kind of see almost everything goes around Mexico City, with a couple new areas kind of heading outside of the city, and even heading into Nuevo Leon and Monterrey, kind of up there being a really important spot as well that we should probably circle. Here you can kind of see those earthquake sections. This definitely doesn't show the extent of the earthquakes over the years. There's just been tons and tons of earthquakes along the west coast, and you can see in the last 30 days alone, this is kind of heading down towards Guatemala, and there's this kind of rift zone that splits the Yucatan Peninsula and heads out to here, and this actually becomes really extreme once you get out to Puerto Rico. There's quite a lot of earthquakes down there, and these are actually quite sizable, 6.0, 7.0, 8.0s you can see there. So I just wanted to look at a couple more things on the charts here. Let's see what we got. There's also kind of some extreme weather here that comes in on the west coast as well as east coast, and then heading down into the rest of Central America, a lot of lightning. And then over the years, you can kind of see what's been going on with their peso. It's been losing value. Right now, it's about 20 to 1. So $1 gets you 20 Mexican pesos. And you can see these years that were not so good all the way back to 2003 or 2002. Certain years on the green here were not so great for the Mexican economy. And then here you can kind of see the top companies in Mexico. Some surprising thing is food processing and real estate. So it would be nice to see some of these real estate companies start working with some of the food processing companies and make for a more solid economy. But right now, pretty much the top company in Mexico is a telecom company. So here's some more details about different years in Mexican history, kind of seeing which were good. And here I have the green being good, and the red being bad years. And you can kind of see there's been some different jumps, but recently, definitely they've had a major uptake around 2020, basically making the economy significantly better. But then also they've been importing a lot more stuff as well, and that's been a problem there going back to 2010. But they kind of corrected that problem around 2018. So hopefully these diagrams and graphs will be useful to you. I'll kind of go through everything one more time, just so you can see all the details here. So in general, one thing that you really want to think about is the homicide rate and the crime. Basically, Mexico is similar to Colombia, and it's actually quite significant problem there. So you want to kind of take a look at some of these crime maps and take a look at what's going on. I would say Acapulco is something for sure to think about here, as well as this other city kind of heading out into this range. Looks like pretty dangerous in that area as well as Cancun not being super safe. And definitely these border towns, Juarez and Tijuana. But the standard of living is actually kind of weird. You can see that in Mexico City, they're basically making around $25,000 per year on average, and then up here in Monterrey, as well as these areas bordering the United States, are actually doing quite well. So it's kind of a surprising truth. And then ever since the 1950s, things have been getting a lot better in Mexico. You can see early 1900s. And then around the 1950s, everything has really been gone up a lot. So GDP per capita, average Mexican making around $16,000 per year, which doesn't actually correspond to this, but you can see it's probably maybe even $20,000 per year, the average Mexican. So again, some of these cities, what I can do is you can go in and you can click in each one of these cities. I'll just show you. Let's do Juarez and load this up. So up in the top thing, they have coordinates, and you can click on the coordinates here for the city, and then you can go down here and they do satellite view, and this one is right next to El Paso. So you'll see this one load up, and this is one of the most dangerous places in Mexico. Is actually right bordered on with El Paso, and you can see you can do street view and kind of zoom in and see what it's like in detail. And I definitely recommend that. So here's the corruption index. So actually, the crime index is slightly different than the corruption index. You can see Venezuela, Mexico is still not super great, but it's around the same scale as actually Brazil. And you can see perhaps even Colombia may be less corrupt. And here you can see Costa Rica actually being not so super corrupt. But some other places you can compare that around the world, green being least corrupt, red being most corrupt. And here is another way, Global Peace Index. You can see Mexico is actually pretty peaceful relative to some places in Africa and the Middle East. So this is more looking at the government side of things. And then this is the annual temperature map. You can see right along the coast, it's actually quite cool, a lot like California, maybe even cooler than some places. And so it's quite surprising. That's pretty much why a lot of people live in Mexico City and in this middle region. In here, let me see if I can zoom in and see, so you can see. Basically, a lot of this is pretty much the same temperature as California in the southern United States, and even cooler than that, surprisingly, because it's up in the mountains, and that's why a lot of people live right here. But definitely getting quite hot as you get down to the Yucatan Peninsula, Veracruz, and the coastline here. So that's something to think about. And definitely you should take a look at these street maps. You can zoom in and take a look at Mexico City, and they'll give you a pretty good idea for the major streets and what's going on in terms of traffic in Mexico City. Right now it's not loading super well, but and then definitely take a look at the other countries. You can see that basically Mexico is actually on the list here of least safe places. United States the rate, the average rate in the United States is about, homicide rate is about 5 per 100,000. And in Mexico, you basically have about 5 times more dangerous in terms of homicide rate. So you definitely want to watch out. And there's definitely other places you can see, even Pakistan here, Philippines, and some other places. Afghanistan is probably safer. So I don't know how accurate all those statistics are, but you may want to look at that. And then here is a link to the TradingView website. You can just do USD to Mexican dollar. Take a look at that. And then definitely take a look at the nighttime map, so you can see basically what's going on electrically in the whole area of Mexico. And you'll definitely see right in here what's going on. And I definitely recommend taking a look at some of these FAO maps. You can see here basically in detail what's going on with population, farming, and a lot of other factors. This shows some of the aquifers. You can see that some of the states may be different here. This is kind of the aquifer map, so you can see the state map is not the same as the aquifer map. And you see Mexico City actually being part of this major river system, kind of heading out here, and then these whole cities kind of heading out into here, which Puerto Vallarta is actually over here, but the river actually is dumping out into there. So there's kind of some differences here, as well as this major river kind of bypassing Acapulco. So there's some different ways to definitely look at what's been going on. And then I definitely recommend taking a look at this NASA population map, just to get an idea for what's going on in the region, and seeing basically how many different areas there are in Central America. So you can basically see Mexico City here, Veracruz, and then you head into Guatemala, being a whole separate region, basically because Guatemala has so much population, and then El Salvador and so on. So that's definitely a map to take a look at. And then definitely take a look at this airplane map. You can definitely see where it's possible to fly into and where it's not possible. So these red dots are pretty much where you're going to get the major airports. So if you're trying to fly on one of the major websites that book tickets, you can pretty much book tickets to these red airports, but it's hard to book them anywhere else. So you may find yourself in a jam if you are not traveling to one of these red points in Mexico. So that's definitely something to think about in terms of policy for Mexico. And then this is the map that shows basically both the aquifers on here as well as the soil map. And this can be helpful just to see the kinds of soil for farming, because farming is such a major factor in Mexico. And then this has got the rivers here with some of those other maps. And this is all available through this data-apps.fao.org website. And then you can show the workbench here, and you can add different major rivers, explore data, and you can sort that out. And then I definitely recommend taking a look at this whole map here, because you can kind of see there's these 3 major regions of mountain ranges heading into Central America here. And mountains are a very big deal in Mexico. You can see in the United States, we have a lot of flat land, but Mexico is actually quite hilly relative to the United States. And then here is kind of the import-export with the Harvard Economic Atlas. You can see that the United States is basically a big player, as well as some places down in Colombia and even Guatemala being a major exporter for the place. And then definitely take a look at the shipping map. I can zoom in here and you can take a look at Veracruz and you can kind of see what's going on along the east coast of Mexico. It's actually quite busy with the Caribbean and fishing, something to think about there. And then this is kind of looking at the geological map, and it kind of does tell us quite a bit about how this Puerto Vallarta may be actually a very active region for earthquakes. You can see these faults coming in here. You can see all this earthquake area kind of going in through there. And then again, back to this main map showing farming in Mexico. This is one of my favorite maps, and you can definitely see all the way along the Yucatan Peninsula. So it's not just population that's important. You can also see farmland areas, and particularly heading down into here, and this new area, kind of being on the Yucatan Peninsula, being a lot of fresh new farmland. And then definitely take a look again at the soil map if you have some time. And then this one is the detailed population map. Definitely Monterrey and Mexico City is important. So if you're trying to study Mexico, you definitely want to take a look at Monterrey. And actually even take a look at those major airport maps. Just take a look at all these red dots. Here you got a red dot right there. But definitely take a look at every red dot here on the map, just to get an idea for what's going on in Mexico. And here is the open infrastructure map. You can kind of compare that to other parts. You can see there's not too much infrastructure on the Baja Peninsula, and most of that's coming out of Mexico City, and kind of how that relates to other parts of. And this is the live earthquake map. I could try to load this up. Hopefully it won't take too long, but definitely this is just in the last 30 days, and you can see this is quite close to Mexico City. And some of these, I don't know what this one is right here. That's a 6.0 down in El Salvador, so that's quite off the coast. And look at what happens over here in Puerto Rico. You can see that fault line coming right through here, so definitely. And then this is kind of the fault line that we noticed on that other geological map, kind of heading right into Puerto Vallarta and separating Baja California. And this is this goes into the San Andreas Fault and gets all those earthquakes in California. But if you look at the long-term map, you'll see even more so about what's been going on there. So, and then kind of the weather map there. I think we'll end it with just one last look at the climate map. And I'll move this around so you can kind of see what's been going on. So basically, Mexico City, and you can kind of compare it a lot to the California climate, and then also the Southwest. There's so much part of Mexico here that's dry. It takes up a huge part of the land, and then it gets quite wet and kind of rather hot in the Yucatan Peninsula and down by Veracruz, similar to what you get in Miami. So that's similar climate to Miami down in here. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the study. Let me know if you got any questions. I'd be glad to work with you on something in Mexico. Some of my best friends are Mexicans. They're great people, and it'd be really fun to work with Mexico. Just because the climate is so nice. I would say in terms of California, a lot of the coastline is a lot nicer than California. And certainly there's some great places to live and work in Mexico, as more and more people try to work between Mexico and the United States, Central America, and the Caribbean. Thank you so much for taking a look at this.